This video is presented by Advanced Gaming Supplements. With the summer sun flying high and leaving me dry, I'm thankful to have Advanced Hydration Supplement. It has no calories or caffeine, but plenty of vitamins and electrolytes to keep me active and hydrated. And their Rainbow Burst flavor isn't just thematically appropriate, it also tastes great, so if you'd like to try it or any one of their amazing flavors, head to advanced.gg and use my code Elly, E-L-L-Y, to get 10% off your order. Once again, that's code Elly at advanced.gg. One summer morning in 1992, artist Sam Bass was on his way to his studio to meet with executives from DuPont Automotive Finishes. They were gathering concepts for their new NASCAR car, and Sam, having already designed some pretty cool cars in his day, had the chance to submit 2 designs of his own, but neither of them would ever see the light of day. That's because, as he was driving, he thought up a 3rd design.
On the way to work, I just had this idea about, well, they want to show a rainbow of colors. It just popped in my mind that I could take the DuPont oval and arc a rainbow over top of it on the hood. And when I got it done, I just knew that was going to be the car.
And he was right. In the final race of the 1992 season, the Rainbow DuPont Chevrolet made its debut as easily the most colorful car on track. But as we'll see over the next 8 years and even beyond, that is just the first of the many marks this car would leave behind. Sam turned heads with his design, and in doing so, alerted the world to racing's future.
And it is Jeff Gordon.
Jeff Gordon! 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 And the performance of a driver who rates among NASCAR's very best.
Ready?
Okay, ready?
Hi, I'm Jeff Gordon. I'll be on Saturday night. Watch it. I should have said Thunder, huh?
In case you didn't catch that, this is Jeff Gordon, and while he might not be too good at public speaking yet, he'll have plenty of time to practice, as even at just 19 years old, he was about to step into a whole new world. But let's back up, because NASCAR's newest, youngest star never intended on being a NASCAR driver. In the beginning, at age 5, he drove quarter midgets, and won so much that he got bored. So then he moved up to go-karts and once again won so much that he once again got bored and quit racing altogether to become a competitive water skier. In his words, he got pretty good, but realized he didn't have a future in it, so by the time he was in high school, he was also back on the track. This time in sprint cars, and you guessed it, he won in those too. But by now, a new problem had emerged. He was so young that most of the tracks around his hometown of Vallejo, California wouldn't let him run. So his family picked up shop and moved to the one place where he was sure to race, the racing capital of the world, Indiana. There he picked up right where he left off, becoming the youngest driver to win in the World of Outlaws Sprint Car Series and the youngest to win a USAC championship in midgets. The kid could clearly cook, and like every other young racer based in Indiana, he was striving for IndyCar. But by the late 80s, the days of just anybody hopping into an open wheeler were pretty much over. You either needed the right backing or the right last name, of which Gordon had neither. So in search of his future, he looked south to the ever-exciting, burgeoning world of stock car racing. He turned his very first laps at the Rockingham Speedway in the middle of 1990, and after driving a second a lap faster than the guy who owned the car he was driving, said owner hired Jeff to run the handful of races left in the 1990 Busch Series. They didn't go great. In fact, of the 3 races he attempted, he only qualified for 1, starting in 2nd and finishing in 2nd, to last. But his body of work was still plentiful enough to catch the attention of Ford, who had an opening in the Bill Davis No. 1 car for 1991. He took the deal and ended up winning that year's Rookie of the Year title, although he didn't win any races. That would happen the following year, when Jeff would win his very first race at the Atlanta Motor Speedway in March of '92. On hand for said race was Cup Series owner Rick Hendrick, who was so taken aback by Jeff's performance that he immediately went to general manager Jimmy Johnson, no relation, to start a whole new team around the young prodigy. Once they finally got negotiating, Gordon had just one request, that his current crew chief Ray Evernham be brought on board as well. And once that was finalized, it was settled. In a complete betrayal of Ford, Bill Davis, and Target, who were hoping to sponsor Gordon, he signed to drive with Hendrick Motorsports and DuPont. And that's how we got here, to the 1992 Cup Series finale.
Note that Jeff Gordon, who will be making his first Winston Cup start here today.
1 week after driving his final race with Ford, he was driving his first for Chevrolet and his first race in the Cup Series. It was also the last race for this other driver. You've probably never heard of him, he's not a very big deal, but what was a big deal in this race was Gordon accidentally dropping a roll of duct tape on the track, which punched a hole through the nose of Davey Allison's car. At the time, Davey was in position to win the championship, but that hole caused his car to handle horrendously, which forced him to fall back and eventually crash out of the race entirely. From the very beginning, whether he meant to or not, Jeff Gordon had a hand in the championship, though he himself would also exit the race early, finishing in 31st. An unbecoming result, but thankfully, it was just the beginning. In parallel with his Busch career, he made a one-off, then had his full debut season where he once again didn't win, but that doesn't tell the full story. In his first Daytona Speed Weeks, Gordon won his qualifier, led his first laps in the 500, and duked it out with a man we'll meet in about 90 seconds. As for the rest of the year, he showed splashes of promise, like in his return to Atlanta where he led late but had to pit for fuel with just 12 laps to go. Or in the fall race at Charlotte where he notched his first career pole award and brought the battle straight to the man we'll meet in a minute. Despite not winning, it was still a statement season for NASCAR's newest Rookie of the Year, although he did receive some criticism. Competitors complained of his recklessness, saying the 22-year-old was too young to be racing at such a high level. Even former Hendrick driver Darrell Waltrip said of Gordon, he hit everything but the pace car, and questioned Gordon even being in the Cup Series. Well, boy did he prove him and everyone else wrong in '94. About being too young, he still wrecked a lot of cars. But with a savvy two-tire call by Ray Evernham in the Coca-Cola 600, Gordon finally got his first Cup Series win.
I'm speechless, man. I mean, this is the greatest day of my life.
And if that wasn't enough to launch him into superstar status, he also took home the win at his home track, the Indianapolis Motor Speedway, in the first ever Brickyard 400.
We'll remember the name, Jeff Gordon, winner of the inaugural Brickyard 400.
2 wins and an 8th place points finish in just his second year, everyone knew that this colorful young bunch was here to stay, though the man that finished 5th that day wasn't very happy about finishing 5th, because for the better part of the last decade, all he had known was winning.
Starting to rain down turn 1, though. We'll see what happens here. Gordon's going out and test the rain.
What kind of advice would you give him if you could right now with that rain maybe coming down?
Stay on pit road. It's not a good time to qualify. I bet he comes on pit road, matter of fact.
Yeah, I would guess so. You know, for me doing the weather, though, I got to have the radar.
If he was smart, he would come on. He ain't too smart.
All right, thanks, Dale.
Have a raindrop. He has lost it.
Slides and smacks the wall, and you heard Earnhardt say that it was misting rain. Said if he's smart, he'll come on pit road, and unfortunately, he didn't, and now he tags at the wall.
Gordon might have finished the year 8th in points, but finishing first was a familiar name, one that had already been there 6 times before. For the 7th time ever and 6th time in the last 9 years, Dale Earnhardt was the Winston Cup champion, by a wide margin too. The era of Earnhardt was nearly a decade old at this point, and nothing indicated that it wouldn't continue. He was still as intimidating as ever. Though of the few races he did lose, Indy stuck with him the most, because you only get the chance to win the first of anything once, and not only did he lose that chance, but lost it to a kid over 20 years younger than him. It wasn't just shocking, it was completely unheard of, and Dale reflected it, what NASCAR had always been. Since the days of bootleggers and shop mechanics, it was the working man's sport. To rise through the ranks, you needed to pay your dues, and that meant many, many years of seat time before you'd even get a crack at Cup. Dale didn't even get to run his rookie season until he was almost 30, because car owners back then didn't look for promise, they looked for experience. In fact, if we look at the top 10 points finishers in '94, you'll see that every other driver was born in the 50s or earlier, whereas Gordon was born in the 70s.
Wonder Boy's here.
I hear him talking about me.
Talk like a little girl.
What? I'm sorry, man. I'm just not as big as you. Not as big a man as you.
Jeff was the exception, the flag bearer for the next generation, but the number 3 still towered over him and the whole sport, poised to break the tie with Richard Petty in 1995, and after Dale led the points for 12 straight weeks to start the season, it was all but a foregone conclusion. Yet the forecast was false. It made no mention of the big black cloud making way for the rainbow.
Jeff Gordon is going to lead this lap, and that gives him the championship.
In the year after winning his first 2 races, Gordon rallied to collect an additional 7 and become the Cup Series' youngest champion in the last 45 years, although Earnhardt didn't let him run away with it. Even while holding a nearly insurmountable lead heading into the last race, as well as Hendrick fielding an additional car that immediately pulled off the track for mechanical problems, and another Hendrick car finishing last with a blown motor, Jeff Gordon still finished the race in 32nd. Hell, he even lost to that additional car. And with Dale winning the race, a points lead that was once 309 strong had been whittled down to just 34 points. But thankfully, the season was over, and while it wasn't pretty, the job was done. So done that toward the end of the race, the Rainbow Warriors ran an unscheduled pit stop with an unusual roster. Rick Hendrick cleaned the windshield, and Ray Evernham changed the tires, so if you're wondering why they finished in 32nd, there you go.
That pit stop was a blistering 39.6 seconds.
Well, all right, so we got a little work to do, you know.
The gloating was appropriate. They had toppled a dynasty, and more so than that, youth prevailed over experience as Jeff Gordon stood on top of the racing world. Though he and the rest of his rainbow-clad crew seemed to underestimate how quickly a new challenger would arise, as the following year, they'd have to do battle with a brand new foe. And the worst part? Their cars were built in the same shop. At this point, it had been over a decade since Texas Terry Labonte's one and only championship. Since then, he's been bouncing around from team to team, driving all manner of different cars, but he seemed to find himself in a good spot with Hendrick. For the past few years, he's been back to winning form. Although being a champion in his late 30s, I don't think he envisioned playing second fiddle to a guy who was barely old enough to drink. So in '96, he decided to turn up the heat. Eventually. Both he and his teammate struggled out of the gate, with Labonte being 30th and Gordon being 43rd in points after the opening 2 races. From there, however, almost in sequence, the two teammates rose through the ranks until they were nose to tail, 1 and 2 in the points just past the halfway point. From there to the end of the season, they would swap the lead 3 times, never letting the other get too far out of reach. And with just 4 races remaining, Gordon held a 111-point lead over Labonte, worth about 30 positions on the racetrack. But through one of the greatest displays of grit we've ever seen, Labonte took advantage of Gordon's misfortune to climb back and win the championship, even while driving the last 2 races with a broken hand. It caught everyone by surprise because he had only won 2 races the whole year, while Jeff had won 10, even more than in the year prior, the year he won the championship. But Terry taught him an important lesson, that consistency was key. And while the 5 only finished outside of the top 30 once, the 24 finished outside of it 6 times, taking hit after hit in the points. They quite literally had a chip on their shoulder heading into '97, the year that the Rainbow Warriors refused to lose.
Refuse to lose, that's the motto that we have this year. I don't care what people say. If they don't think we dominated the sport last year, they're just crazy. And guess what? It ain't going to change in 1997.
In the 5th year of his career, Wonder Boy ran it back with another 10-win season, this time with just 2 DNFs, securing him his 2nd championship. Along the way, he won his first Daytona 500, his 2nd Coca-Cola 600, and his 3rd Southern 500 in a row, enough to win the 2nd ever Winston Million cash prize. He also won that year's All-Star race in a car called T-Rex, named for both the paint job and the lead engineer. Originally built as a test car, the crew endeavored to build it with every component optimized within the confines of the rulebook, so they felt confident entering it into the Winston, an exhibition race, which would turn out to be the right call, as long as they didn't plan on running that car again. Despite the race being just 70 laps, Jeff was able to drive T-Rex from almost last all the way to the front with 9 laps to spare. After the race, Bill France, the CEO of NASCAR, told Ray Evernham that the car was illegal, and after Ray rightfully argued that they built it by the book and that it was legal, Bill responded, "It won't be tomorrow." Changing the rules was about the only way to stop them, and even that didn't slow them down. Dale Jarrett and Mark Martin did their best to keep him honest, but yet again Jeff Gordon prevailed. The Rainbow Warriors were back on top, although they once again struggled in the last race. A 17th place finish wasn't as bad as it could have been, but a ho-hum final stretch to the season allowed his competitors to close in by over 100 points in just the last 2 races. Once again, that's about 30 positions on the racetrack. As much as they had accomplished, as much as they had to celebrate, neither of their cups came as easily as they could have. Sometimes it felt like they were just as good at beating themselves as they were at beating everybody else, and in the beginning of '98, that still seemed to be the case. Although Gordon did win 3 races in the first half of the year, he also had a similar amount of piss-poor performances, the worst of which was a pretty intentional-looking spin by Rusty Wallace to give him and teammate Jeremy Mayfield the top 2 positions in points.
They just drove into the left rear. I don't know what happened.
Obviously, Gordon did not see it the same way you did, Rusty.
Well, that's okay. We had a great race tonight, don't you think? Thank you.
Something very familiar about all this.
All is fair in love and war, and he was just getting Gordon back for bumping him in Bristol the year before. But Rusty awoke something in Jeff, the likes of which we've never seen. Because for the rest of the season, 20 straight races, he didn't just keep it in the top 30 or the top 20 or even the top 10. In all but one of those 20 races, he finished top 5, including 2 bronzes, 5 silvers, and 10 golds. 13 victories on the whole 33-race season. I cannot stress enough how much of an oddity that is. 13 wins in a NASCAR Cup Series season. Only 2 other drivers in the modern era have accomplished something similar, and sticking it to those guys, Gordon set records too. His 4 straight wins during the summer put him in a tie with 6 others for consecutive wins, and his 17 straight top 5s still stand as a series record to this day. Even in a stacked field with 42 competitors, Gordon beat the heavy majority of them in all but 2 cases, and for 13 of those races, he beat every single one of them. You'd think with stats like those, he'd have the Cup in his hands by September, but Mark Martin actually put up similar stats, only falling short in wins and having too many DNFs. Consistency, the one thing that had always been the Warriors' weakness, had finally been achieved. And by winning the last 2 races, they completed a title campaign more dominant than Mark, Rusty, or even Dale Earnhardt would ever put together. One of, if not the greatest championship in NASCAR's modern era.
And his 3rd title comes in 189 starts. This kid is only 27 years old.
We'll be talking about that one for a while.
In '99, Gordon picked up right where he left off by winning his 2nd Daytona 500 and continuing to win through the whole season. Even after Ray Evernham, the man who oversaw Jeff from his very first start, left the Warriors to start his own race team, Gordon still won the next 2 races with new crew chief Brian Weitzel. But inconsistency crept back in, and although a 7-win season, as we've seen, is nothing to scoff at, a 3-win season in 2000 brought a spiritual end to the era, as DuPont soon swapped out the Rainbows for Flames, and while they continued their partnership, the Rainbow Warriors, the definitive NASCAR team of the late 90s, was no more. So in case you haven't been keeping track, that's 166 top 10s, 129 top 5s, 52 victories, and 3 championships for 1 team, 1 car, and 1 driver in just 6 years. If I didn't know any better, I would say that this is the greatest run for any single livery in NASCAR history, and that's not even where the story ends. While it would never again don its iconic spectrum of colors, the 24 would return to the Winston Cup stage the very next year, as Gordon would collect his 4th and final championship in '01. And to think that all of this happened before he even turned 30, the same age Dale Earnhardt was when he won his first championship all the way back in 1980. It was now an expectation, youth beating out experience, and as the years passed, youth became experience, as Gordon would go on to break the record for most consecutive starts in the Cup Series, running in every race from that fateful day in '92 all the way up until 2015. It was one of the longest, most successful careers for any driver ever, but even if he had called it quits after '01, running just 9 seasons in total, he'd still have a case for being one of the best. That's just how much he accomplished in such a short amount of time, and in the process, opened the floodgates for the youth movement that's taken the sport by storm. If not for Gordon, it's likely that guys like Kurt Busch, Kyle Busch, Kevin Harvick, Joey Logano, even Dale Earnhardt Jr. wouldn't have gotten the chances that they did. In fact, it was Gordon himself who convinced Rick Hendrick to sign a relatively unknown trophy truck driver from El Cajon, which ended up paying off arguably even better than Jeff himself, as Jimmy Johnson would go on to win even more championships and break even more records.
Guess we hired the right guys.
Jeff Gordon may very well be the most influential race car driver ever. By breaking in and dominating like he did, he didn't just cement a legacy, he shifted the landscape of the whole sport and challenged everyone's preconceptions of what a race car driver could be. Don't believe me? Well, remember the top 10 points finishers of '94? If we average out their ages at the time, we'll see that they're about 39 years old, whereas the top 10 in points today are, on average, 32 years old. A 7-year decrease in age, the youngest of which is Gordon's own protege, William Byron. He first cracked the top 10 in points a couple years ago, and even still was a year older than Gordon was in '94. The future, even while it's more prevalent than ever before, still has nothing on Jeff Gordon. Nearly 20 years to the day of his first start in '92, Jeff ran the final race of the 2012 season. He was now far removed from his Rainbow Warrior days and wasn't even a factor in this year's championship, but this race still had significance. Just a few months after, DuPont would sell their painting division to the company that would later found Axalta, and while their partnership would continue, that meant that this was the final race for Jeff Gordon and DuPont. A partnership that spanned 2 decades, consisted of 643 races, and produced 83 victories was coming to a close tonight. So in one last DuPont paint scheme designed by Sam Bass, Gordon took them out on top.
I mean, this is for DuPont right here, 20 years.
He'd run one last silver scheme in his planned final start in 2015, and then another in his actual final start in 2016, But not the silver, not the Pepsi blue, not even the flames had anything on the Day Glow red, dark metallic blue, and all the other colors of the rainbow.